So, Sonia, perhaps you could, thanks for taking some time to talk with us. Perhaps you could share with our audience three things about happiness and based on your research that most psychotherapists either don't know about or maybe even it's completely counterintuitive or maybe it's the opposite of what they do.
Sure. Well, thanks, Bob. It's a pleasure to talk to you today. It's hard for me to know, I guess what psychotherapists find counterintuitive, but I'll sort of make my best effort. So, there's a lot of evidence, growing evidence, that happiness is in part genetically influenced. That some people have a predisposition for a low level of happiness, and there's also evidence showing that our life circumstances also influence our happiness quite a bit. So if you are, say, unemployed or don't have a strong social support network, don't have a partner, you're likely to be less happy. But I guess what some people find surprising is that despite sort of the impact of genetics and despite the impact of our life situations on our happiness levels, there's a great deal that we as individuals can do to become happier, to increase our levels of happiness, of meaning, of flourishing in our lives. And a lot of my research and my colleagues' research is sort of on that, speaks to that, how, the ways that we can sort of learn to think about ourselves and the world differently, how we can behave in our daily lives, can really impact our happiness, and we can sort of take some control. One way I like to summarize that is sort of their kind of habits, kind of the habits of happy people that we can learn. So a lot of my research and what I'll be talking about in my talk in Reston is about sort of those strategies. So that's one thing that some people find counterintuitive, is sort of the amount of control that the average person has on their happiness levels. They may not be able to, get themselves from like a 2 to a 10, but maybe from a 2 to a 6. So I mean, there are some constraints on that. So that's one thing I wanted to talk about. Another thing I want to talk about is, there's a lot of advice in self-help literature that kind of tells readers, that you should do X or you should do Y. You should like come up with a goal and follow it, or try to think positively, or try to be more forgiving. And I think that's a really valuable advice, and it's based on a lot of research. But one of the again, one of sort of the takeaways from my research and other people's research is that it's really critical to choose the strategy that really fits your values and your goals and your personality and your resources. That not everything is for everyone, right? So, I've heard from a lot of people who email me and they say, I read this book, or I was told that I should do X, I should count my blessings, and I can't do that. It doesn't work for me, and so they feel like a failure. They feel like they'll never be happy. Whereas the reality is that there are probably 100 happiness increasing activities or positive activities that people can try, and so they need to, we all need to sort of choose the best fitting strategy, the one that we feel sort of the most natural and comfortable and enjoyable doing. At least start with that. So that's another, I guess, takeaway from my work that I'll talk about
Would
in my talk, towards a fit.
would that be there's a classic move from solution-oriented therapy, solution-focused therapy that asks people, what do you do? What works? And like ask people exception finding questions. What makes you happy? And at least for a little bit, and whatever that person says, or that might be one, and then do more of that. Don't do something you've never look. Some other person's idea. If Would that fit
Yeah.
with what you're saying?
Yeah, it really fits with what I'm saying. And we often do that exact thing. We give people like a list of strategies. Like, here are 12 things you could do. What do you think is going to work for you? What do you think you're going to feel most natural doing? Now, there's a little bit of a caveat, is that sometimes people need to try things that are not comfortable, right? That maybe are not what they would want to do. And I'm thinking of, like, say, someone who's anxious and they don't want to try not, whatever, leave their bed unmade, or, go speak to a group of people. So I'm not saying that you should only do things that are kind of comfortable and meaningful and enjoyable, but that's what the research says. If you start with that, right? You start with small steps, right? So absolutely, I agree with that. So, okay, so that's the second thing I want to talk about. And the third thing actually is maybe the most interesting to me, and that is that sometimes positive activities, kind of these strategies people use, whether they read about them in a book or they learn about them from a therapist or a coach, sometimes they might backfire. They're not always sort of positive all the time. And so I've been doing some research lately on how gratitude sometimes actually can make people feel even less happy. And I
Really?
almost kind of hate to say because I think gratitude
That's against the. You can't say that.
is illegal, right? But I mean,
Blasphemy.
gratitude is a very powerful strategy, and there's so much evidence that shows that it has tons of benefits.
Except when
But
it doesn't.
under some conditions, for some individuals in some cultures, it actually might backfire. I don't think I want to say more because you can come to my talk and hear more about not just gratitude but other strategies that might not always be beneficial. I think we should always keep our eye out for that. Sort of when can sort of our pursuit of happiness actually backfire and maybe even make us less happy.
So, and let me just ask you this, because I know you only have another minute or two, but it sounds like one of the things you're saying is that perhaps therapists shouldn't, especially if you're a happy therapist, shouldn't necessarily expect if you're like a if you're Tigger, if you're a Tigger therapist and you have a what's the donkey's name? An Eeyore. That's it. An Eeyore client. Maybe you shouldn't try to turn him into a Tigger.
And that really speaks also to the issue of fit that I was talking about before.
Right.
That, for example, some people are extroverted, some people are introverted, and you don't want to force an introvert to act like an extrovert.
Right.
I mean, sometimes an exercise might be useful, but you want to kind of tailor your strategies to the personality of the patient or the client, or their skills, their strengths and weaknesses, etc.
Well, I know you're busy, and I appreciate you taking the time out. We look forward to seeing you at the conference, and hopefully the people will get a little bit of a taste of some of the really great ideas you're talking about.
Awesome. So I can't wait to come. So see you in May.
A few months. End of May. Thanks, Sonja.
Great. Bye.
Bye.